She'll be dead before sunrise. That's what they whispered as they pushed Virel through the northern citadel gates. Not a wedding, an execution. She, a weak Omega from a broken border pack, was sent as a sacrificial offering to save a fragile treaty. But when the Alpha King declared her his mate before the entire hostile council, everything changed. They wanted her silent. They wanted her submissive. Instead, she fought back, with words, with defiance, and finally, with a power no one thought she possessed. This is the story of a girl sent to die, who became the queen that rewrote the destiny of two kingdoms. Stay until the end to see how she transforms the world. Hit like. If you believe in the power of the underestimated, and comment what city you're watching from. The chains were supposed to be metaphorical. Viral Ashwin hadn't expected literal iron around her wrists when the carriage door opened, but there they were, cold, heavy, biting into skin still raw from the journey. She stood at the base of the northern citadel, wind cutting through the thin ceremonial dress they'd forced her into, and understood with perfect clarity that she was never meant to arrive as a bride. She was a hostage dressed in white. Move. The guard's voice was flat, bored. He'd done this before, delivered living cargo, watched it processed, forgot about it by dinner. Virel moved, not because of the shove against her shoulder blades, but because standing still meant freezing, and she'd promised herself she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching her collapse on the steps. The citadel loomed above her, all black stone in sharp angles, built by people who valued function over beauty and intimidation over welcome. The gate stood open like a mouth, and dozens of eyes tracked her approach from the walls, the windows, the shadows between the battlements. She felt every single one. "They're wondering how long you'll last," said a voice to her left. One of her escorts, a woman named Daria from her own border pack, assigned to deliver her and then return home with clean hands. The record is 6 days. Girl from the Eastern Territories, 3 summers ago. Virel didn't ask what happened on day 7. She already knew. The treaty stated very clearly, 1 life in exchange for peace. The Northern Kingdom will accept a bride from the border packs as symbol of unity. Refusal or death of said bride will be considered an act of war. Her father, the aging, desperate alpha of a pack torn apart by famine and internal fighting, had chosen her within minutes of reading those terms. Not his eldest daughter, not his favored sons. Virel, the Omega runt who'd never shifted properly, who'd been a disappointment since birth. "You should be honored," he'd said, not meeting her eyes. "You're saving your people." The memory tasted like ash. The great hall swallowed her whole, vaulted ceilings, stone columns thick as ancient trees, and a cold that seemed to radiate from the walls themselves. A semicircle of faces waited at the far end, arranged in a council formation that made Virel think of judges at an execution. At the center, elevated slightly above the others, sat a man who could only be the Alpha King, Cadric Thornvale. She'd heard the stories. Everyone had. The wolf who'd unified the Northern Territories through a combination of strategic brilliance and ruthless violence, who'd turned a collection of feuding clans into an empire, who was said to kill challengers with his bare hands and negotiate treaties with the same bloody fingers. Looking at him now, Virel thought the stories undersold it. He wasn't handsome in any conventional sense. His face was too angular, too severe, marked by a scar that ran from temple to jaw on the left side. But he had presence, the kind that made the air feel thinner, made her lungs work harder. Dark hair pulled back carelessly, eyes the color of winter storms, and an absolute stillness that made every other person in the room seem frantic by comparison. He was looking at her the way someone might examine a horse at market, assessing, calculating, utterly detached. "This is the border pack's offering?" The question came from a woman to the king's right, silver-haired and sharp-featured, wearing council robes with military precision. "She's smaller than the last one." "The last one tried to stab you, Counselor Vane," Daria said sweetly. "Perhaps size isn't the relevant metric." Vane's eyes narrowed. "The last one had spirit. This one looks like she'll break if I speak too loudly." Virel's fingers curled into fists, chains rattling. She'd been standing here less than 5 minutes, and already they were discussing her like she wasn't present, wasn't listening, wasn't human. "Remove the chains." Kadrick's voice cut through the murmuring. It wasn't loud, but it silenced the room instantly. The guard beside Virel hesitated. Your Majesty, protocol states... I don't recall asking about protocol. The king's gaze never left Virel's face. Remove them! Now! The iron fell away. Virel's wrists ached where the metal had pressed, red marks already forming, but she kept her hands steady at her sides and made herself meet his eyes. Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. State your name, he said. You know my name. The words came out harder than she'd intended, sharp enough that several council members shifted in their seats. It's in the treaty you signed, the one that bought me for the price of grain shipments and a ceasefire. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Daria made a strangled sound beside her. One of the counselors actually laughed, short, shocked, quickly smothered. Kadrick leaned forward slightly, elbows on the armrests of his seat, fingers steepled. So she does have a tongue. I have a lot of things you weren't expecting, Virel said, and immediately wondered if she'd just signed her own death warrant. But she was so tired, tired of the journey, tired of being afraid, tired of watching people discuss her fate while pretending she was deaf and blind and stupid. If they were going to kill her, let it be for something real. Your father, Kadrick said slowly, described you as obedient, mild-tempered, eager to serve. My father is a liar and a coward who sold his daughter to save his own skin. Virel's voice shook, but not with fear. If you believed him, you're a fool. The counselor to Kadrick's left shot to his feet. How dare you speak to... Sit down, Rendall. The king's tone hadn't changed, still measured, still calm, but the counselor dropped back into his chair like his strings had been cut. Kadrick stood. He was taller than she'd estimated, broader through the shoulders, and when he descended the steps toward her, Virel had to lock her knees to keep from backing away. He stopped 3 feet in front of her, close enough that she could see the exact shade of gray in his eyes, could smell leather and wood smoke and something darker underneath. What did you think would happen here? He asked quietly. When they dressed you in white and sent you north? Virel's throat tightened. I thought I'd be locked in a cell until someone decided whether to use me as leverage or an example. And yet you insulted me in front of my entire council within 10 minutes of arrival. His head tilted slightly. That doesn't seem like the behavior of someone trying to survive. Maybe I'm tired of surviving. The admission slipped out before she could stop it. Maybe I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. For a long moment, Kadrick said nothing, just studied her with those storm-gray eyes while the council held its collective breath. Then he smiled, barely, just a slight curve at one corner of his mouth, but it changed his entire face. Interesting, he murmured. He turned back to the council, voice rising to fill the hall. I have made my decision regarding the Border Pack's offering. Here it comes, Virel thought. Execution, imprisonment, public humiliation before being sent back in pieces. She will stand as my mate. The hall erupted. Counselors shouted over each other, their voices blending into an incomprehensible roar. Vane was on her feet, face flushed with fury. Rendall looked like he might actually have a stroke. Daria's hand clamped onto Virel's arm hard enough to bruise. And Virel just stood there, dizzy and disconnected, certain she'd misheard. Your Majesty, this is unprecedented. Complete disregard for tradition. Haven't even verified her bloodline. Insult to every noble family in the kingdom. Kadrick raised one hand. The noise died instantly. The treaty, he said clearly, states that the Northern Kingdom will accept a bride from the Border Packs as symbol of unity. I am accepting her. As my mate and queen, the treaty has been fulfilled. She's an Omega! Vane's voice cracked with outrage. Unmated, unproven, from a pack so weak they're barely holding territory. She's also standing right here, Virel interrupted, finding her voice again. And she'd appreciate it if you'd stop discussing her like furniture. Vane's eyes went wide, then narrow, then very, very cold. You see, she said to Kadrick, absolutely no sense of propriety, no training, no understanding of her place. Her place, Kadrick said softly, is beside me. Anyone who disagrees is welcome to challenge that decision formally. His gaze swept the council. No? Then this session is concluded. Council dismissed. They filed out slowly, shooting looks at Virel that ranged from hostile to poisonous to calculating. Daria pulled her aside before leaving, voice low and urgent. "What did you do?" "I have no idea," Virel admitted. "Well, you'd better figure it out." Daria's fingers tightened on her arm. "Because that wasn't mercy. That was politics. And in this court, being the king's mate won't protect you. It'll paint a target on your back so large, they'll see it from the border." Then she was gone, and Virel was alone in the hall with Kydrick and two silent guards who'd materialized from somewhere. "I don't understand," she said finally. "You will." Kydrick gestured to the guards. "Show her to the queen's chambers. See that she has everything she needs." "Wait," Virel stepped forward. "You can't just declare me your mate and then walk away. I have questions. I have a council to manage before they stage a coup." He paused at the doorway, glancing back. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be considerably worse than today." Then he was gone, and Virel was being escorted through corridors that all looked the same, stone and shadows, and the occasional glimpse of courtyard through narrow windows. The queen's chambers were obscene, not because they were opulent, though they were, all dark wood and thick carpets and furniture that looked both ancient and priceless, but because they existed at all. There had been no queen in the north for generations. Kydrick's mother had died in childbirth. His father had never remarried. These rooms had been waiting. A servant appeared, older woman, kind eyes, efficient hands, and helped Virel out of the ridiculous wedding dress and into something warmer, brought food that Virel couldn't taste, drew a bath that Virel sat in until the water went cold. When she was finally alone, she stood at the window and looked out at the citadel grounds. Training yards below, where warriors sparred in the fading light. Walls beyond, stretching into darkness. And somewhere past those walls, the border territories she'd left behind. They'd sent her here to die. Kydrick had declared her his mate instead. And Virel had absolutely no idea which fate was worse. Assis. She woke to the sound of breaking glass. For a confused moment, she thought she was back home, listening to her father destroy the dining hall after another failed negotiation. Then memory crashed back. Citadel, council, the king's impossible declaration. And she sat up in an unfamiliar bed, in an unfamiliar room, wearing an unfamiliar nightgown that was too fine for her skin. Another crash, closer this time. Virel grabbed the nearest object, an ornate candlestick that probably cost more than her family's annual grain supply, and moved toward the door. The sitting room beyond her bedroom was chaos. Furniture overturned, papers scattered, and two figures grappling near the hearth, one in servant's clothes, the other in palace guard uniform. The guard had a knife. Awesome. "Don't care what orders you have," the servant was gasping. "I won't let you." The blade flashed. The servant went down with a choked cry, and the guard's eyes locked on Virel, standing frozen in the doorway. "Well," he said conversationally, wiping blood on his sleeve, "this is fortunate. Saves me the trouble of searching." Virel's fingers tightened on the candlestick. "Who sent you?" "Does it matter?" He stepped over the servant's body without looking down. "You're the treaty bride. The hostage. The pawn nobody wants. Your own father probably paid for this." The worst part was that it might be true. Her father eliminating the evidence of his cowardice, or the council removing a problematic variable, or any one of a dozen factions that viewed her existence as inconvenient. "Drop the candlestick," the guard said. "I'll make it quick." Virel looked at the ornate metalwork in her hands, looked at the knife, looked at the servant bleeding out on the expensive carpet. Then she threw the candlestick at his head and ran. She made it 3 steps before he caught her, arm around her throat, blade against her ribs. "Stupid," he hissed in her ear. "Should have taken the quick death." Virel drove her elbow back into his stomach. Not hard enough. He barely flinched. But it bought her a second to twist, to grab his wrist, to sink her teeth into the meat of his forearm until she tasted copper. He howled and threw her off. She hit the floor hard, vision sparking, and heard him coming. No time to think. She rolled, grabbed a shard of broken glass, came up slashing. It caught him across the face. Not deep. He jerked back, more surprised than hurt. But it was enough. Enough for the door to crash open. Enough for Kadric to cross the room in 3 strides and put himself between Varel and the assassin. The guard's eyes went wide, then calculating, then resigned. He lunged. Kadric caught his wrist mid-strike, twisted, and there was a sound like breaking branches. The guard screamed. The knife clattered away, and then Kadric's hand was around his throat, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. "Who sent you?" The king's voice was very quiet. The guard's face was turning purple. He clawed at Kadric's grip, gasping, trying to answer or beg or both. Kadric squeezed tighter. "I asked a question." The border pack paid me, said she was a traitor." "Liar." Kadric's other hand moved faster than Vero could follow. She heard something snap. The guard went limp. Silence crashed down, broken only by Veryl's ragged breathing and the servant's shallow, pained gasps. Kadric let the body fall, turned to look at Virel, and for the first time since she'd arrived, his expression was readable. Fury. "You're bleeding," he said. Virel looked down. She was glass cuts on her hands, something warm running down her side where the knife had grazed her ribs. Nothing deep, nothing fatal. "I'm fine." "You're not." He crossed to her in 2 steps, hands hovering like he didn't know where to touch, like he was afraid she'd break. "You should have stayed in the bedroom, locked the door, called for guards. He would have killed your servant." "I have many servants." "She has 1 life." Virel pushed his hands away, moved past him to where the woman lay bleeding. "Help me with her. Now." For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he was beside her, tearing strips from expensive curtains to make bandages, applying pressure to wounds with the same efficient brutality he'd used to kill the assassin. "You fight," he said quietly. "You thought I wouldn't? I thought you'd be smart enough to run." "I did run. It didn't work." Virel tied off a bandage, checked the servant's breathing, shallow but steady. "So I fought instead." Kadric was looking at her with that same expression from the council hall, surprise mixed with something else, something harder to name. "They'll try again," he said. "Whoever sent him. They won't stop." "I know." "You understand what that means? What it means to be declared my mate in a court that already wants you dead?" Virel met his eyes. "Do you understand what it means to be sent here by people who wanted me gone, and then saved by a king who doesn't trust me? I'm walking a knife's edge either way. At least here I can fight back." Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Guards poured in, took in the scene, dead assassin, injured servant, their king kneeling in blood beside the treaty bride, and froze. Kadric stood slowly. "Secure these chambers, double the guard, get a healer for Maris." He pointed at the servant. "And find out how a paid assassin walked into the palace wearing my colors." They scattered to obey, and Kadric turned back to Virel. "Come with me." "Where?" "Somewhere safer than here, unless you'd prefer to stay in rooms where people just tried to murder you." Virel looked around at the chaos, her gilded cage now a crime scene, luxury revealed as paper-thin protection. "Lead the way," she said. Or the king's private chambers were nothing like the queen's rooms. No luxury, no decoration, just brutal functionality. Weapons on the walls, maps on the tables, a bed that looked like an afterthought. It reminded Virel of a military camp, not a palace. Kadric poured 2 glasses of something amber and handed her one. "Drink." She did. It burned going down, settled warm in her stomach, loosened something tight in her chest. "Your turn," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "You declared me your mate in front of everyone. Killed an assassin to protect me. Brought me to your private chambers." Virel set the glass down harder than necessary. "But you haven't touched me, haven't claimed me, haven't even explained why you're doing any of this. So explain, now." Kadric leaned against the table, arms crossed. "You want the political answer or the truth?" "Both." "Politically? Your leverage. Your pack sent you here as a peace offering, but they're weak, fractured, desperate. By claiming you as mine, I signal that I'm willing to honor treaties with even the smallest territories. It stabilizes the region, prevents the eastern kingdoms from exploiting border chaos, and costs me nothing. Except a mate you don't want." "I didn't say I don't want you." Virel's breath caught. "Then what's the truth?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those storm-gray eyes. The truth is that you walked into my hall in chains and insulted me to my face. Every instinct you should have for self-preservation, you ignored. You should have been terrified. You should have begged. You should have played the meek little Omega your father promised. Would that have saved me? No. He smiled, sharp and humorless. But it would have been easier to ignore you. Easier to use you as the political tool you were meant to be and never think about it again. And now? Now you're a problem. He moved closer, and Varel fought the urge to back away. Because I don't want to ignore you. I don't want to use you and discard you. I want to know who you are when you're not performing survival. I want to know what made you brave enough or stupid enough to bite an armed guard. I want... He stopped, shook his head. I want things I have no business wanting from a treaty bride who was sent here to die. Viral's heart was hammering so hard she thought he must hear it. So what happens now? Now you stay here in these chambers under my protection until I can be certain there won't be another attempt on your life. With you. With guards outside the door and very clear boundaries between us. His voice went flat, controlled. I won't touch you unless you ask. I won't claim you unless you choose it. The declaration was political necessity. What happens beyond that is your decision. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like another kind of cage, one made of honor and restraint and a distance that somehow hurt worse than hatred. And if I choose to leave, Varel asked, to walk out of the citadel and go back to my pack? Then I'll let you go, and your pack will kill you within a week for the crime of failure. And if I stay? Then you learn to navigate a court that wants you dead, a council that despises you, and a king who can't decide if you're the worst mistake he's ever made or the best. Virel laughed, short, sharp, edging toward hysterical. Those are my options, death or impossible politics. Welcome to the North, Kadric refilled her glass. It's not particularly fair, but it's honest. She drank again, slower this time, thinking. The servant, Maris, had tried to protect her. The assassin had been sent by her own people. And Kadric, the ruthless Alpha King everyone feared, was offering her choices when he could have simply taken. Nothing made sense. Everything made sense. I'll stay, she said finally. Not because I trust you, not because I have better options, but because I'm tired of being the thing that gets traded and broken and thrown away. If I'm going to die, I want it to be for something I chose. Kadric's expression shifted, something raw and quickly hidden. Then we have an agreement. Not yet. Varel set down her glass and met his eyes. I need to know one more thing. Ask. That assassin said my father paid him. Was he telling the truth? The silence stretched out, heavy with meaning. Yes, Kadric said quietly. Your pack's leadership has been in contact with certain factions here. They want the treaty to fail. They want you to fail. Your death would give them grounds to declare the agreement void and restart hostilities on their terms. The words hit like physical blows. She'd known. Of course she'd known, but hearing it confirmed was different. They sent me here to die, she said numbly. Yes. And you knew, from the beginning. Yes. Then why... Her voice cracked. Why claim me at all? Why not just let it happen? Kadric moved then, closing the distance between them, and his hand came up to touch her face, gentle, careful, like she was made of glass. Because you deserved better than being a pawn in someone else's game, he said quietly. Because you walked in here ready to fight, and I wanted to see what would happen if someone fought for you instead. Varel's eyes stung. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of him, refusing to break. That's not political, she managed. No, he agreed. That's the truth. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, catching a tear she hadn't meant to shed, and for just a moment Varel let herself lean into the touch. Warm, solid, real. Then she pulled back. I should sleep. Take the bed. I'll sleep in the chair. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not displacing you in your own chambers. Then we'll share. He held up a hand at her expression, with very clear boundaries. I'll stay on my side. You'll stay on yours. Nothing happens unless you choose it. It was absurd. Impossible. Entirely improper. And Varel was so tired of sleeping alone in hostile rooms, jumping at every sound, wondering if she'd wake up to assassins. "Fine," she said, "but if you cross the boundary, I'm keeping the glass shard from earlier." His laugh surprised her, genuine, warm, human. "Fair enough." They settled in on opposite sides of the bed, carefully not touching, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. Varel stared at the ceiling, hyper-aware of his presence, his breathing, the warmth radiating from his side. "Kadric?" she said into the darkness. "Yes?" "Thank you for saving me tonight." A pause. Then, "Thank you for fighting. Most people wouldn't have. Most people are smarter than me. Most people are more afraid." His voice was quiet, thoughtful. "You're terrified. I can smell it on you, but you fight anyway. That's not stupidity. That's courage." Varel had no answer for that. So she just lay there, listening to him breathe, feeling safe for the first time since she'd left her pack. And when she finally slept, she dreamed not of chains and assassins, but of storm-gray eyes and the ghost of a touch against her face. Morning came too quickly. Varel woke to find Kadric already gone. A note on the pillow that read, "Council meeting. Stay in chambers. Don't open the door for anyone but me or guards you recognize." K helpful. Slightly paranoid. Entirely fair given that someone had tried to kill her less than 8 hours ago. She found clean clothes laid out, practical traveling gear, not court finery, and wondered who'd brought them while she slept. Wondered if the entire citadel was gossiping about the treaty bride spending the night in the king's chambers. Probably. The guards outside the door were new faces, both women, both watching her with carefully neutral expressions when she emerged. "Good morning," Virel tried. "My lady." The taller one inclined her head. "His Majesty instructed us to escort you anywhere within the secured areas of the citadel, for your protection." Translation: "You're confined to quarters. Don't try to leave." "Wonderful," Virel muttered. "Where's the secured area's limit?" "Inner courtyard, library, training yards, dining hall during designated hours." The guard recited it like a memorized list. "Everywhere else requires approval." So, a larger cage, but still a cage. Virel was considering which restricted area to test first when footsteps echoed down the corridor, quick, purposeful, headed their direction. Counselor Vane appeared around the corner, trailed by 2 attendants and an expression of absolute disdain. "So it's true," she said without preamble. "You've moved into the king's chambers. How remarkably shameless." The guards tensed. Virel straightened her spine and met Vane's cold gaze directly. "Good morning, Counselor. I'd love to stay and exchange pleasantries, but I'm afraid shameless behavior takes up most of my schedule." Vane's eyes narrowed. "You think you're clever, but cleverness won't save you here. You're not mated, not claimed, not bonded. You're a political statement in borrowed clothes, and the moment you stop being useful, you'll be discarded." "Funny," Virel said. "I was told the exact same thing about council members who overstep their authority." One of the guards made a sound that might have been a smothered laugh. Vane took a step closer, voice dropping to something dangerous. "Listen carefully, girl. This court has rules, hierarchies, systems that have existed for centuries. You can't simply walk in and expect to overturn everything because the king finds you temporarily amusing." "I don't expect to overturn anything." Virel kept her voice level despite her racing heart. "I expect to survive. If that requires breaking your rules, I'll break them. If that requires making enemies, I'll make them. I've already been sent here to die. What more can you possibly threaten me with?" For just a second, something flickered across Vane's face. Uncertainty, maybe, or recalculation. Then she smiled, thin and cold. "We'll see how long that bravado lasts." She swept away, attendants scurrying after her, leaving Virel alone with the guards and her hammering pulse. "Well," the taller guard said quietly, "that was either very brave or very stupid." "Can't it be both?" Virel asked. The guard's lips twitched. "I suppose it can, my lady." Virel spent the rest of the morning in the library, not reading, just existing in a space that felt neutral, removed from the constant judgment of the court. She found histories of the northern territories, treaties dating back generations, records of past queens who'd married in from other kingdoms. None of them had lasted long. She was deep in a particularly grim account of a bride from the western mountains who'd disappeared after 6 months when someone cleared their throat behind her. Varel spun, heart jumping, hand automatically reaching for a weapon she wasn't carrying. But it was just a girl, younger than Varel by a few years, wearing servant's clothes, holding a tray with tea and bread. "His Majesty sent this," the girl said nervously. "Said you'd probably forget to eat." He wasn't wrong. Viral's stomach was a knot of anxiety that had no room for appetite. "Thank you," she managed. "What's your name?" The girl blinked, like she hadn't expected to be asked. "Sarah, my lady." "I'm Virel, just Virel." "I know who you are, my lady. Everyone knows who you are." Right, of course they did. The treaty bride. The king's scandal. The Omega who'd somehow survived her first night when everyone expected her to fail. "What are they saying?" Virel asked. "About me." Sarah hesitated, clearly torn between honesty and self-preservation. "It's all right," Virel said gently. "I'd rather know the truth than comfortable lies." "They say," Sarah took a breath, "they say you're either very clever or very desperate. That you've seduced the king somehow, made him forget his duty. That your pack sent you as a spy or maybe an assassin. That you won't last the month." It was almost exactly what Virel had expected, and somehow still hurt to hear. "And what do you think?" she asked. Sarah looked surprised again. "My lady?" "You. Sarah, what do you think when you look at me?" The girl studied her for a long moment, really looked, not just saw the label and moved on. "I think," she said slowly, "that you're the first person in this citadel who's asked my name in 3 years of service. And I think anyone who bothers to be kind to servants probably isn't the monster the court wants me to believe in." Something warm and unexpected bloomed in Virel's chest. "Thank you." Sarah ducked her head, embarrassed, and backed toward the door. "I should go. But if you need anything, my lady, just ask for me. I'll help if I can." Then she was gone, and Virel was alone again with books and tea and the slowly growing realization that not everyone in this place wanted her dead. Some might even become allies, if she could survive long enough to find them. The council meeting ran long into the afternoon, and when Kydrick finally returned to his chambers, he found Virel exactly where he'd left her, Difba awake, and reading what appeared to be military strategy texts from 2 centuries ago. "Light reading?" he asked, shedding his formal coat and reaching for the whiskey decanter. "Educational." She didn't look up from the page. "Did you know that 3 of your predecessor kings were assassinated by their own councils?" "4, actually. You missed King Aldrich the Brief." He poured 2 glasses. "The histories are sanitized for public consumption." "Comforting." She finally met his eyes. "How was the meeting?" "Productive, if you define productivity as 5 hours of thinly veiled threats and political maneuvering." He handed her a glass. "They want you gone." "I gathered that from Counselor Vane's visit this morning." His hand stilled halfway to his mouth. "Vane came here?" "Briefly. Long enough to inform me that I'm a shameless political statement in borrowed clothes who will be discarded the moment I stop being useful." Virel took a sip, grimaced at the burn. "I may have told her I'd break whatever rules necessary to survive." Kydrick laughed, surprised it out of him. "You really don't value your own life, do you?" "I value it enough to fight for it, just not enough to grovel for it." She set down the glass. "What did they say in the meeting?" "About me." He considered lying, decided she'd know. "Rendell proposed that you be confined to the Queen's chambers under guard until your status is clarified. Vane suggested a formal inquiry into your background and intentions. Elder Thorne, you haven't met him yet, he's ancient and terrifying, argued that I'm violating 6 different traditions by housing you in my chambers without a proper bonding ceremony." "And what did you say?" "I reminded them that I'm king and their advisors, and the distinction matters." He drank. "It didn't go over well." "You're protecting me." It wasn't a question. "Why?" "Because someone has to." He moved to the window, looking out at the training yards below. "And because the moment I show weakness on this, they'll tear you apart to prove a point." Virel joined him at the window, close enough that he could smell lavender and old books on her skin. "What point?" "That I'm not as unshakable as I pretend to be." That I can be manipulated through emotion or attachment or whatever they think this is. His jaw tightened. They're wrong. Are they? He looked at her then, really looked, at the intelligence in her dark eyes, the stubborn set of her shoulders, the way she held herself like she was ready to fight or flee at any moment but refused to do either. I don't know, he admitted. That's the problem. Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. One of the guards entered, face grim. Your Majesty, there's been an incident in the lower courtyard. Kadrick's entire body tensed. What kind of incident? A fight, sir, between northern-born warriors and border pack guards who accompanied the bride. It's escalating. Varel went pale. Daria. She was supposed to leave yesterday. The border delegation stayed at my request, Kadrick said. I wanted witnesses from your pack to confirm you'd been received alive and whole, to prevent your father from claiming breach of treaty. He grabbed his coat. Stay here. Don't leave these chambers. If this is about me, you should stay alive. His voice came out harder than intended. Please, Varel, for once, just listen. He was gone before she could argue, taking the stairs 3 at a time down to the courtyard where shouting echoed off stone walls. The scene was chaos. 20 northern warriors squared off against a dozen border pack guards, weapons drawn, blood already spilled on the cobblestones. And in the center of it all, Daria stood with a split lip and murder in her eyes, facing down a northern soldier twice her size. Enough! Kadrick's voice cracked like a whip. Everyone froze. Weapons down, now! The northern warriors obeyed immediately. The border guards hesitated, looking to Daria, who slowly, deliberately lowered her blade. Who started this? Kadrick demanded. Silence. Then the big northern soldier stepped forward. They insulted your mate, your Majesty, called her a whore and a traitor. I defended her honor. Daria spat blood. We called her what she is, a pawn who spread her legs for the enemy king within 24 hours. Where I come from, that's called treason. Kadrick moved before thinking, had Daria by the throat, lifted her off the ground. Say that again. To her credit, she didn't flinch, just met his eyes with pure defiance. Truth hurts, doesn't it? You claimed her to humiliate her pack, made her your whore to prove you could. But you're not fooling anyone, your Majesty. She's still just meat you're using until something better comes along. He could kill her, should kill her, for speaking about his mate that way. His fingers tightened. Kadrick, don't. Varel's voice cut through the red haze. He turned, still holding Daria, and found her standing at the courtyard entrance, guards hovering uselessly behind her. I told you to stay in the chambers, he said through his teeth. And I told you if this was about me, I had a right to be here. She walked toward him, calm and steady, despite every eye on her. Put her down. She insulted you. She's saying what everyone thinks. Killing her won't change that. Viral stopped 3 feet away. Please, put her down. Kadrick released Daria, who staggered back, coughing. Viral didn't spare her a glance, just looked at the assembled warriors, northern and border alike, and raised her voice. You want to know if I'm a whore? Fine. I'll tell you exactly what I am. She turned in a slow circle, making sure everyone could see her face. I'm the daughter your alphas didn't want. The Omega they sent north in chains because I was expendable. I arrived here expecting to die, and when the king offered me protection instead, I took it. Not because I'm weak, not because I'm his whore, but because I chose survival over pride. Daria laughed bitterly. I chose, Varel's voice cracked like ice. Something you'll never understand because you've spent your whole life following orders, being a good little soldier, doing what you're told. Well, I'm done with that. I'm done being the thing people use and throw away. If that makes me a traitor in your eyes, so be it. I'd rather be a living traitor than a dead martyr. The courtyard was utterly silent. Then one of the northern warriors started clapping, slow, deliberate. Others joined in. Not all, but enough. The border guard shifted uncomfortably. Daria's face twisted with something complicated, anger maybe, or recognition. You have no idea what you've done. What this means for your pack, your family. My pack sent an assassin after me last night, Varel interrupted. My family wanted me dead the moment I left their territory. So no, Daria, I don't care what this means for them. I care about staying alive long enough to prove I'm worth more than the price they sold me for. She turned to Kadrick. "I'd like to go back inside now." He nodded, still processing, and gestured to the guards. "Escort her. The rest of you, dismissed. Fighting in the courtyard will result in disciplinary action regardless of cause. Am I clear?" Murmurs of assent. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, still throwing glances at Virel as she walked away. Kadrick caught up to her in the hallway, pulled her into an empty side room. "You shouldn't have come down there," he said. "You shouldn't have tried to kill Daria. She called me what I've been called my entire life." Virel's hands were shaking. He could see them trembling even as she tried to hide it. "Words don't scare me anymore. Silence does. Being invisible, being nothing, that's what kills me." Kadrick caught her wrists, held them steady. "You're not nothing." "Then what am I?" She looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "You declared me your mate, but you won't touch me. You protect me, but keep me at arm's length. You say I deserve better, but you won't tell me what that means. I'm standing in the middle of a war I don't understand, and I need you to be honest with me. What am I to you?" The question hung between them, raw and demanding. He stopped, started again. "You're the first person in 10 years who's looked at me like I'm human instead of just king. You're brave and reckless, and you make me want things I gave up on wanting. You're a complication I didn't ask for, and the best decision I've made in months. And I'm terrified that if I claim you properly, bond with you the way tradition demands, I'll lose whatever small piece of choice you have left in this nightmare." Virel stared at him. "You think I don't have a choice?" "Do you? Really?" His grip on her wrist gentled. "You're here because your pack sent you. You're in my chambers because assassins tried to kill you. You're standing beside me because the alternative is death. Where in any of that did you actually choose?" "I chose to fight back." Her voice was fierce. "I chose to speak in that courtyard. I choose every single day not to break. And I'm choosing now to tell you that I want this, whatever this is between us, because it's mine. Not my father's, not the council's, not politics or treaties or survival. Mine." Kadrick felt something crack open in his chest. Something he'd kept sealed for years. Something dangerous and necessary and entirely uncontrollable. "Virel, don't tell me I don't understand what I'm saying. Don't tell me I'm confused or traumatized or making decisions I'll regret." She pulled her wrists free, placed her hands flat against his chest. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm choosing you, properly, completely. If you'll have me." He should say no, should maintain distance, keep this political, protect them both from the inevitable fallout. Instead, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was desperate and claiming, and weeks of tension finally snapping, his hands in her hair, her fingers digging into his shoulders, both of them trying to get closer despite already being pressed together. When they finally broke apart, breathing hard, Virel smiled, real and bright and devastating. "Was that a yes?" she asked. "That was a terrible idea that I'm going to regret immensely." He kissed her again, softer this time. "But yes." The bonding ceremony was scheduled for 3 days later, enough time for the council to lodge formal objections, and for Kadrick to overrule every single one. Virel spent those days in a strange limbo, caught between the Queen's chambers that still felt like a crime scene, and Kadrick's rooms that felt too intimate despite nothing happening beyond conversation and careful, aching restraint. Sarah became her unofficial lady's maid, bringing food and gossip in equal measure. "The northern houses are furious," she reported on the second day, helping Virel into a dress for a mandatory council appearance. "Lady Marin has 3 daughters, all of age, all perfect matches for the king. She's been planning her youngest wedding for 5 years. Let me guess, I'm ruining everything?" "Spectacularly," Sarah grinned. "It's wonderful. No one's talked about anything else in weeks." The council chamber was packed when Virel arrived, escorted by guards who now looked at her with something approaching respect. She took her place beside Kadrick's chair, not in it, that felt presumptuous, but close enough to show unity. The meeting was brutal. 3 hours of debate over ceremony traditions, bonding rights, bloodline verification, and a dozen other bureaucratic nightmares that made Virel's head pound. She stayed silent through most of it, letting Kadrick navigate the political minefield, until Counselor Rendall suggested genetic testing to confirm her Omega status. Absolutely not, Varel said before Kydrick could respond. Every head swiveled toward her. Rendall's eyebrows rose. It's standard procedure for all royal matches. I'm not a specimen to be examined. She kept her voice level despite rage building in her chest. My status is documented in the border pack records. If that's insufficient for you, perhaps the real issue isn't my genetics, but your need for control. How dare you? How dare I what? Object to being treated like breeding stock? Demand basic dignity? Varel stood, and Kydrick didn't stop her. I've spent my entire life being poked and prodded and evaluated and found wanting. I'm done with it. You'll either accept me as I am or reject me entirely, but I won't be dissected for your comfort. Silence crashed down. Elder Thorn, the ancient, terrifying counselor Kydrick had mentioned, leaned forward in his seat. Bold words for someone with no power here. Power is relative, Varel said quietly. I might not have title or position or bloodline, but I have the king's ear and his protection. That's more power than some of you will ever hold. Thorn smiled, thin, approving. She has teeth. Good. The last 3 queens were too soft for northern winters. They died quickly. That's not helping, Kydrick murmured. Wasn't trying to help, trying to assess. Thorn's gaze bored into Vierel. You understand what bonding to our king means? The enemies you'll inherit, the scrutiny you'll face, the expectations that will crush you if you're not strong enough. I understand that I'm already facing all of that without the bond, Varel said. At least this way I'll have standing to fight back. Practical. Thorn nodded slowly. Very well. I withdraw my objection to the ceremony. Let the border Omega become queen. We'll see if she survives the crown. One by one, the other counselors fell in line, some grudgingly, some calculating, all recognizing when a battle was lost. When the meeting finally adjourned, Varel's legs were shaking so badly she could barely walk. Kydrick caught her elbow, steadied her. That was either brilliant or suicidal, he said quietly. Can it be both? Apparently that's your specialty. They made it halfway to the chambers before Vane intercepted them, 2 guards flanking her. A word, Your Majesty. Privately. Kydrick's jaw tightened. Anything you need to say can be said in front of my mate. Can it? Vane's smile was poisonous. Very well. We've received word from the border territories. Your bride's pack is mobilizing forces along the northern frontier. They're calling the bonding ceremony a violation of treaty terms and demanding her immediate return. Viral's blood went cold. That's impossible. The treaty specified a bride to be received in good faith, not a bride to be claimed as queen and elevated above her station. Vane's eyes glittered. Your pack argues that by bonding with her, you're changing the terms unilaterally. They want renegotiation, or war. Kydrick went very still. How long have you known this? The messenger arrived during council session. I thought it prudent to wait until after to share. You thought it prudent to blindside me with a potential war declaration. His voice dropped to something dangerous. Get out of my sight, Vane. Before I do something we'll both regret. She left, spine straight, satisfaction radiating from her like heat. Varel felt the walls closing in. They're using me again. They're desperate. Kydrick pulled her toward his chambers, through the door, shut it firmly. Your pack is barely holding territory. They need an excuse to break the treaty without losing face. You were supposed to fail quietly, die in suspicious circumstances maybe, or prove unsuitable. Instead, you're about to become queen. That ruins everything they planned. So what do? We have options. He started pacing, mind clearly racing. We could delay the ceremony, renegotiate terms, find a compromise that satisfies both kingdoms. No. He stopped mid-stride. No? No delays, no renegotiation, no compromises. Viral's hands clenched into fists. I'm done being the piece everyone moves around the board. We bond as planned. If my pack wants war over it, let them come. Virel, you're talking about potentially thousands of deaths. I'm talking about calling their bluff. She moved closer to him, urgent. My pack is weak. You said so yourself. They don't want war. They want leverage. They want to scare you into backing down, into sending me back so they can execute me quietly and claim I failed. Well, I'm not going back. And I'm not letting them dictate my life anymore. Kadric studied her face. You understand what you're asking? If I go through with this and they do attack, every death will be partially on you. Every family destroyed, every territory lost. That blood stains both of us. I know. Her voice didn't shake. But the alternative is teaching them that threats work, that they can control you, control us, by dangling war like a weapon. That's worse. That's how kingdoms fall. He touched her face, gentle, despite the violence they were discussing. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Then we bond tomorrow. And if they march north, we'll meet them at the border. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Together. The ceremony took place at dawn in the Great Hall, witnessed by the full court and both kingdoms' representatives. Viral wore white again, not the flimsy treaty dress, but proper northern formal wear, heavy silk and intricate embroidery, a gown meant to withstand winter and war alike. Kadric met her at the altar in full ceremonial armor, and when their hands clasped, she felt the bond snap into place, not gentle, not easy, but powerful and undeniable, like lightning grounding through her bones. The crowd gasped. Even among the hostile faces, she saw awe. Omega and Alpha, the officiant intoned, bonded in tradition, sealed in blood, unified in purpose. What is joined here cannot be sundered save by death itself. Varel looked into Kadric's storm-gray eyes and saw her own fierce determination reflected back. When they kissed to seal the bond, power rippled through the hall, visible, tangible, impossible to ignore. And in the back of the crowd, she saw Daria watching with an expression that might have been respect or might have been fury. Hard to tell. The celebration feast afterward was tense and performative, everyone pretending joy while calculating angles. Varel sat beside Kadric at the high table, feeling the bond pulse between them like a second heartbeat, and wondered how long they had before the fragile peace shattered completely. She didn't have to wonder long. The messenger arrived before dessert was served, border guard breathing hard, blood on his uniform. Your Majesty. He dropped to one knee. The border territories have broken treaty. 2,000 warriors march north. They'll reach our frontier within 3 days. The hall exploded into chaos. Kadric stood, and silence fell immediately. Send word to every northern house, full mobilization. We march at first light. You're going to war? Vane looked delighted. Over her? No. Kadric's hand found Virel's, pulled her to standing beside him. We're going to war because a weaker kingdom challenged our sovereignty and thought we'd bend. We're going to remind them why the North has never been conquered. Virel's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment everything broke. The decision that would cost lives or save them, destroy her or prove her worth. She looked out at the assembled court, hostile, calculating, waiting for her to crumble. Instead, she raised her voice, clear and strong. I know what you're all thinking, that I'm not worth fighting for, that I'm just a border Omega who should have died quietly to keep the peace. She paused. You're right. I'm not worth a war, but this isn't about me anymore. This is about whether northern kingdoms bow to southern threats, whether power means anything if you're too afraid to use it, whether you're still the warriors you claim to be or just politicians playing dress-up in your ancestors' armor. The crowd stirred, angry, uncertain, provoked. So here's what I'm offering, Virel continued. I'll ride to the border with the king. I'll stand on that battlefield and prove I'm not a liability. And if I fall, if I die out there, at least I'll die fighting instead of cowering in a castle while braver people bleed for me. Kadric's hand tightened on hers, warning, maybe, or support. Elder Thorn rose slowly from his seat. The girl makes a point. Shame would poison us faster than war. Better to fight and risk losing than hide and guarantee decline. He looked around the hall. I say we ride. Who's with me? One by one, warriors stood. Not all. Some still looked murderous, some still calculating. But enough. More than enough. And Virel realized with creeping dread that she'd just talked herself onto a battlefield where she had no business being, where her complete lack of combat training would be exposed, where she'd likely die in the first engagement. But Kadric was watching her with something that might have been pride, and the bond between them thrummed with shared determination, and she thought maybe, just maybe, this was the right kind of terrible decision. "Tomorrow, then," she said quietly. "We ride at dawn." The feast dissolved into war planning, and Varel found herself swept up in preparations she barely understood, supply chains and troop movements and tactical formations. Sarah appeared at some point with practical riding clothes and a worried expression. "My lady, you can't actually mean to go with them." "I can, and I do." "You'll be killed." "Probably." Varel pulled on the leather vest, tested the fit. "But I'll be killed here eventually anyway. At least on a battlefield, I'll see it coming." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." Varel caught her hand, squeezed. "Listen, if I don't come back, don't. If I don't come back, find a better house to serve. One that treats you like you matter, promise me." Sarah nodded, crying openly now, and Varel pulled her into a brief, fierce hug before sending her away. That night, alone with Kydrick in chambers that felt both familiar and foreign, Varel tried to memorize everything. The shape of his hands, the sound of his breathing, the weight of the bond settling into her bones. "You don't have to come," he said quietly, lying beside her in the darkness. "I could leave you here, protected, safe and hated." She rolled to face him. "They'd tear me apart the moment you left. You know that." "I know." He touched her face. "Trying to give you an out anyway." "I don't want an out. I want to fight." She caught his hand, held it against her cheek. "I want to prove I'm more than what they think I am." "You've already proven that." "Not to them. Not to myself." She paused. "And maybe not to my pack either. Maybe if they see me standing with you, fighting instead of cowering, they'll understand that I'm not the weak thing they threw away." Kydrick was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What if you can't fight? What if your Omega nature won't let you shift, won't give you the strength you need?" It was the question she'd been avoiding, the fear that kept her awake in darkness. "Then I'll find another way," she said, more confident than she felt. "Strength isn't just physical. You taught me that." He kissed her then, slow and deep and desperate, like he was trying to memorize her too. And when they finally fell asleep tangled together, Varel dreamed of battlefields and blood and a power she couldn't name building in her chest like storm clouds gathering. She woke before dawn to the sound of armies assembling in the courtyard below. Kydrick was already dressed in full battle gear, checking weapons with practiced efficiency. "Ready?" he asked. Varel looked at herself in the mirror. Border Omega in borrowed armor, terrified and determined in equal measure. "No," she admitted, "but let's go anyway." They rode out as the sun crested the horizon, 3,000 northern warriors at their backs, heading toward a war that Varel had inadvertently started and had no idea how to finish. And somewhere in the chaos of hoofbeats and armor and barely controlled violence, she felt something shift inside her, something that had been sleeping her entire life, something that smelled like ozone and tasted like copper. She didn't know what it was, but it was waking up. The feeling grew stronger with each mile they traveled, a restless energy coiling in Varel's chest like a caged animal testing the bars of its prison. She'd never felt anything like it. Omegas didn't experience the pre-shift surge that Alphas described, the violent anticipation that made their wolves claw at their skin from the inside. But this felt close. "You're quiet," Kydrick said, riding beside her at the column's head. His warhorse was massive, coal-black, bred for battle. Varel's mount was smaller, steadier, chosen for someone who'd learned to ride only 3 weeks ago. "Thinking," she managed. "About? How badly this could go. How many ways I could die. Whether my father is watching from the border territories," and laughing. She glanced at him. "The usual." His mouth quirked despite the tension. "You know you can still turn back. I could send an escort. We've had this conversation." Her hands tightened on the reins. "I'm not running." "Stubborn. You like that about me." "I'm starting to question my judgment." They rode in silence for a while, the army stretching behind them like a metal serpent. 3,000 warriors in formation, supply wagons, horses, weapons. The northern force was smaller than the border pack's reported numbers, but better trained, better equipped, and considerably more motivated. Still, 2,000 against 3,000 were bad odds, especially when one side included a queen who'd never held a weapon in combat. Elder Thorn rode up alongside them, his ancient gelding somehow keeping pace despite looking like it should have died decades ago. "We'll reach the border valley by nightfall," he announced. "Scout reports indicate the border force is already there, dug in on the southern ridge. They're not planning to negotiate." "Neither are we," Kadrick said flatly. "Good." Thorn looked at Virel with those sharp, calculating eyes. "You ever seen a real battle, girl?" "No, Elder. It's nothing like the stories. No glory, no honor, just blood and screaming and trying not to trip over corpses." He smiled without humor. "You'll probably vomit. Most people do their first time. Try not to do it on the king." "I'll make a note of that," Virel said dryly. Thorn actually laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "She'll do fine, assuming she survives." He rode off, leaving Virel with a knot of anxiety the size of her fist. "He's trying to scare you," Kadrick said quietly. "It's working. If you suggest I turn back one more time, I'm going to push you off that horse." His grin was brief but genuine. "Understood." They made camp an hour before sunset, close enough to the border valley that Virel could smell smoke from the enemy fires. The northern force set up with military precision, perimeter guards, weapons checks, meal rotations. Virel felt useless, hovering near Kadrick's command tent while warriors twice her size prepared for violence she couldn't imagine. Sarah had insisted on coming despite Virel's protests, and now she appeared with food neither of them wanted to eat. "The warriors are talking," she said quietly, setting down the tray. "Some think you're good luck. A queen on the battlefield, bonded to the king, they say it's a sign of strength. And the others?" Sarah hesitated. "They think you're a liability. That the king is distracted protecting you instead of focusing on strategy." "They're probably right." Virel picked at bread she couldn't taste. "Where's Kadrick?" "War Council. He said to tell you he'll return before dark." Sarah touched her arm. "My lady, I've been thinking. Don't. If something happens tomorrow—" "Nothing will happen," Virel lied. "We'll fight, we'll win, we'll go home." "And if you don't win?" Virel looked at her, really looked at this girl who'd shown her kindness when no one else would, who'd volunteered to ride into war because her lady was too stubborn to stay safe. "Then you survive," Virel said firmly. "You find Kadrick if he's alive, or Elder Thorn if he's not, and you make them promise to protect you. Don't stay loyal to my memory. Stay alive. That's an order." Sarah's eyes filled. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair. That's the point." Virel pulled her into a brief hug. "Now go. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be worse than today." After Sarah left, Virel stood outside the tent and watched the camp settle into uneasy sleep. Warriors checking weapons one last time, sharpening blades, writing letters they hoped wouldn't need to be sent. The strange energy in her chest pulsed stronger. It almost hurt now, like something pressing against her ribs from the inside, demanding release. She was so focused on the sensation that she didn't notice Daria approaching until the other woman was 3 feet away. "You look like hell," Daria said without preamble. Virel turned. "Shouldn't you be with the border forces? This is your pack we're fighting." "Was my pack?" Daria's jaw tightened. "They relieved me of duty the moment I refused to confirm you'd seduced the king, said I was compromised. Traitor by association." "So what are you doing here?" "Honestly, no idea." Daria looked at the northern camp, at the organized chaos of preparation. "I should hate you. You're everything wrong with our leadership. Weak bloodline, no combat training, too soft to survive. But watching you stand up in that council, seeing you ride out here when you could have hidden—" She shook her head. "You're either the bravest person I've met or the stupidest." "Definitely the stupidest," Virel said. "Yeah." Daria's mouth quirked. "But brave too. Don't get yourself killed tomorrow. Would be a waste." She walked away before Virel could respond, disappearing into the camp's shadows. Kadrick returned after full dark, exhausted and tense, smelling like leather and war planning and stress. Virel pulled him into the tent, made him sit, brought him food he didn't eat. "Talk to me," she said quietly. "The border force outnumbers us significantly. They have high ground. Their alpha commanders are experienced, well-trained, and motivated by the belief that I stole you." He rubbed his face. Our advantages are better equipment, tighter formations, and the fact that half their warriors are conscripts who don't want to be here. So what's the plan? We hit them at dawn before they're fully awake. Fast, brutal, overwhelming force concentrated at their weakest point, the eastern flank where the conscripts are positioned. Break through, create chaos, force a retreat before it becomes a prolonged engagement. He looked at her. You'll stay in the rear guard with the supply train, protected, away from the fighting. No. His expression hardened. Virel, I told the council I'd stand on that battlefield. I told your warriors I wasn't a liability. If I hide in the rear while they bleed, I prove everyone right, that I'm weak, useless, not worth protecting. She caught his hands. I need to be visible. I need them to see me there, fighting with them. You can't fight. You've never shifted properly, never trained with weapons. Then I'll carry supplies. 10 wounded. Something. Anything except hiding. Her voice cracked. Please, Kadric, don't make me prove them all right. He was quiet for a long time, war and love and logic battling across his face. You stay beside me, he said finally, every moment. You don't engage enemies, you don't chase glory, you don't do anything remotely heroic. The second things go wrong, you run. Agreed? Agreed, Viril lied. They both knew she was lying. That night they lay together in the tent, armor shed but tension remaining, the bond between them humming with fear and determination. I love you, Kadric said into the darkness. I should have said it before, in case... Don't. Virel pressed her fingers to his mouth. Don't say in case, say it like we have forever. We don't have forever, we might not have tomorrow. Then we have tonight. She kissed him, fierce and desperate. That's enough. It had to be. Dawn came too fast and too cold, the sky the color of old steel. Viril dressed in the lightest armor they'd found for her, leather reinforced with metal plates, enough to maybe stop a glancing blow but not a direct strike. She looked ridiculous, felt ridiculous. But when she emerged from the tent and saw the warriors assembling, some of them nodded at her, acknowledged her presence with something that might have been respect. It helped. A little. The march to the valley took an hour, the northern force moving in disciplined silence. Virel rode beside Kadric, that strange energy in her chest now a constant pressure, making it hard to breathe. You all right? He asked, voice low. No, you? Terrified. He glanced at her. Don't tell the army. Your secret's safe. They crested the ridge and looked down into the valley, and Viril's breath stopped. 2,000 warriors waited below. Border pack forces spread across the southern slope in loose formation, banners flying, weapons gleaming in the weak morning light. And at their center, mounted on a white stallion, was a man Virel recognized even from a distance. Her father. Alpha Torvin Ashwin, gray-haired and hard-faced, wearing the ceremonial armor he'd kept from his youth. He looked small from here, insignificant, but beside him stood someone else, taller, broader, radiating the kind of power that made the air feel different. Who's that? Viril whispered. Kadric's expression went cold. Marcus Vrati, Alpha of the Eastern Coalition. I thought they were neutral in this conflict. They were supposed to be, Elder Thorn said, riding up beside them. This changes everything. The Coalition fields another 1,500 warriors minimum. If they've allied with the Border Pack... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. 3,500 against 3,000 were impossible odds. We retreat, one of the northern commanders said. Regroup, call for reinforcements. And look weak, Kadric interrupted, and embolden every kingdom on our borders to test our resolve. No, we fight. That's suicide. Then we die well. Kadric looked at Virel and she saw the apology in his eyes. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you come. I made my choice. She tried to sound brave, mostly sounded terrified. What do we do? We charge anyway, hit them hard and fast before they can fully coordinate. Hope for chaos and luck in equal measure. He raised his voice to carry across the assembled northern force. Warriors of the North, today we face enemies who thought us weak, who believed we'd run rather than fight, who sent assassins and spies and threats because they were too cowardly to face us directly. Well, here we stand, here we fight, and here we show them what northern steel tastes like. The roar that went up was deafening. 3,000 voices raised in fury and defiance and desperate courage. And then they charged. Varel had thought she understood what battle would be like. She was wrong. The noise alone was overwhelming, screaming, metal on metal, horses shrieking, the wet sounds of blades finding flesh. The northern force crashed into the borderlines like a wave hitting rocks, and everything became chaos. Kadric stayed close to her, his sword singing as he cut through enemies with brutal efficiency. Varel clung to her horse, ducked a swinging blade, felt something hot spray across her face, and realized it was blood. "Stay with me!" Kadric shouted over the din. She tried, but the fighting surged around them, separating them, and suddenly Varel was alone in the middle of a battlefield with warriors twice her size trying to kill each other all around her. A border pack soldier saw her, recognized the queen's colors, grinned. He came at her with a spear. Varel kicked her horse, dodged left, not fast enough. The spear caught her mount's flank, and the animal screamed and went down, throwing Varel hard into the mud. Pain exploded through her shoulder. She rolled, gasping, trying to get up, trying to find Kadric in the chaos. The soldier stood over her, spear raised. "Nothing personal, Your Majesty, just following orders." Varel grabbed a handful of mud and threw it in his eyes. He stumbled back, cursing, and she scrambled away on hands and knees, desperate and terrified and completely out of options. Then something inside her broke. Not broke, shattered. Like a dam collapsing, like a cage door ripping off its hinges. That pressure in her chest exploded outward, and suddenly Varel couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except feel power flooding through her veins like liquid lightning. Her bones shifted. Pain ripped through her, worse than anything she'd ever experienced, worse than she'd imagined possible. She screamed, and the sound came out wrong, distorted, inhuman. The soldier backed away, spear falling from nerveless fingers. What? Viral's body twisted, reformed, grew. Fur erupted across skin that was no longer skin. Her spine elongated, her face stretched into a muzzle. Her hands became claws that dug into bloodied earth. The transformation that had eluded her entire life completed in seconds. Brutal, violent, unstoppable. She was shifting. But not into the small, weak Omega wolf she'd expected. The creature that rose from the mud was massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, fur the color of winter storms, eyes blazing with power that had been compressed and denied for 23 years and was now finally, catastrophically free. The soldier ran, smart man. Viril threw back her head and howled, a sound that cut through the battlefield noise like a knife through silk. Warriors on both sides stopped fighting, turned, stared, because they could feel it, the power radiating from her like heat from a forge. The impossible strength of an Omega who shouldn't exist, who'd been told her entire life she was nothing, proving everyone spectacularly wrong. Kadric fought his way to her, blood-spattered and wild-eyed, and stopped dead when he saw her. "Varel!" His voice was barely audible. She couldn't answer in this form, could barely think past the rage and power and terrible, wonderful freedom of finally being whole. A roar went up from the border forces, fury and fear mixed. Because if the weak Omega bride could shift like this, what did that mean? What did it make her? Marcus Vrati pushed through his lines on horseback, staring at Virel with naked shock. "That's impossible. Omegas don't. They can't." "Apparently she can," Kadric said, moving to stand beside her. His hand touched her flank, steadying. "Stand down, Vrati. This fight is over." "Like hell it is." Virel's father appeared, rage twisting his features. "She's an abomination, a freak. That's why we sent her away. We knew she was wrong, broken." "She's not broken," Kadric's voice carried across the suddenly silent battlefield. "She's what you feared most. Power you couldn't control. Strength you couldn't suppress. And now she's mine." Virel felt the bond between them flare, felt Kadric's absolute certainty and fierce pride, and something else clicked into place. She turned toward the border forces, toward her father, and let power bleed into her wolf form until she was practically glowing with it. Then she charged. Not at random soldiers, at her father specifically. Warriors scattered out of her way, too shocked to intervene. Torvin tried to run, but his horse was slower than a massive wolf, with 23 years of rage fueling her. She caught him as he fell, claws pinning him to the ground, jaws inches from his throat. "Viral, don't!" Kadrick's voice cut through the haze. "He's not worth it." He was right. Killing Torvin would feel good for maybe 30 seconds, then haunt her forever. But she could terrify him. She leaned closer, let him smell blood on her breath, let him see intelligence and fury in her eyes. Then she spoke, the words coming out distorted but understandable in the way of powerful shifters. "I am not yours anymore." She released him, stepped back, and Torvin scrambled away so fast he fell twice, staring at her with absolute horror. The border forces were in disarray now, warriors looking to their alpha for guidance and finding only a coward who'd sent his daughter to die rather than acknowledge her strength. Marcus Vrati rode forward slowly, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I think," he said carefully, "we may have made a mistake." "You think?" Kadrick's voice was acid. "The border pack approached us claiming you'd violated treaty terms, that you'd stolen their Omega and elevated her beyond reason." Marcus looked at Virel. "They failed to mention she was this, whatever this is." "She's my mate," Kadrick said flatly. "My queen. And if you have a problem with that, I invite you to challenge it formally." Marcus was silent for a long moment, studying Virel's massive wolf form, calculating odds in politics and probably his chances of survival. "No challenge," he said finally. "The Eastern Coalition withdraws from this conflict. What happens between the North and the border pack is not our concern." He turned his horse and signaled retreat. His forces fell back in good order, leaving the border pack suddenly and catastrophically alone. Torvin looked around at his depleted forces, at the northern warriors who'd barely taken casualties, at his daughter who'd transformed into a creature of legend. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice shook. "Yes, it is." Kadrick moved to stand beside Virel, one hand resting on her back. "Your forces are broken. Your allies abandoned you. Your daughter, the one you tried to kill, just proved she's worth 10 of you. Surrender now and I'll let your warriors go home. Refuse and we end this in blood." The border forces were already retreating without orders, conscripts fleeing the field, even the professional soldiers backing away from the massive wolf who'd appeared from nowhere. Torvin's face twisted with impotent rage. "She's still nothing, still wrong, still—" Viril snarled and he fell silent. Then she began to shift back, painful in reverse, bones grinding and reforming, fur receding. It hurt almost as much as the transformation had, but she pushed through it, forced her body back to human shape. She stood naked and bloody in the middle of the battlefield, steam rising from her skin in the cold air, and met her father's eyes. "I was never nothing," she said clearly. "I was just waiting for a reason to fight back. Thank you for giving me one." Someone, Sarah, loyal Sarah, appeared with a cloak and wrapped it around Viril's shoulders. Kadrick steadied her as her legs threatened to give out, the energy drain from shifting leaving her hollow and shaking. But she stayed upright, stayed visible. The border forces retreated fully, Torvin among them, leaving their dead and dying on the field. The northern warriors erupted into cheers, ragged, shocked, disbelieving cheers that gradually built into something approaching worship. Viril swayed, exhausted beyond measure, and Kadrick caught her. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got you." "Did we win?" she managed. "You won." He kissed her forehead. "You beautiful, reckless, impossible woman. You won." The world tilted sideways, and Viril let unconsciousness take her, secure in the knowledge that for the first time in her life she'd proven she was more than what anyone expected. She woke in the command tent hours later, body aching like she'd been beaten with hammers. Sarah sat beside her, eyes red from crying. "You're awake," she breathed. "Thank the... You're awake. How long was I out?" 6 hours. The healers said the shift drained you completely, that you shouldn't have been able to maintain that form at all, let alone fight in it." Sarah squeezed her hand. "What were you thinking?" "I wasn't," Viril admitted. "Something just broke, and then I was shifting and I couldn't stop it. The warriors are calling it a miracle, a sign. They're saying you're blessed, touched by ancient power." Sarah's expression was complicated. "They're not wrong." Kadrick entered then, looking exhausted but relieved. He dismissed Sarah gently and sat beside Virel. How do you feel? Like I was trampled by horses and then put back together wrong. She tried to sit up, gasped at the pain. What happened after I passed out? The border forces retreated in full. We let them go. No point pursuing a broken army. Marcus Vrati sent formal apologies and a rather expensive gift to smooth things over. And your father, Kadrick's expression darkened. He's claiming you're possessed, corrupted by northern magic, no longer his daughter. Good, Virel said. I don't want to be his daughter anymore. The northern houses are in an uproar. Some are calling you a hero. Others think you're dangerous, unpredictable, a threat. He touched her face gently. The council wants to test you, study you, understand what you are. And what am I? I have no idea. His smile was crooked. But you're mine. That's all that matters to me. Oh, Virel wanted to believe that. Wanted to think the transformation solved everything, that proving her strength meant acceptance. But she'd lived too long in hostile courts to be that naive. They're going to try to control me, she said quietly, or kill me, whichever seems easier. Probably. Kadrick's hand tightened on hers, which is why we're going to make you so publicly, undeniably powerful that killing you becomes impossible. We're going to turn you into a symbol they can't erase. How? His grin turned sharp. We're going to give you everything you should have had from the beginning. Title, position, authority. And then we're going to let you use it. Outside the tent, Virel heard the Northern Army celebrating their unexpected victory, singing songs of the Omega Queen who'd transformed on the battlefield and saved them all. The girl sent to break had become the weapon that turned the tide. And now, covered in bruises and barely able to stand, Virel finally understood what power really meant. Not the ability to hurt others, the refusal to be hurt anymore. The ride back to the Citadel took 3 days, and Virel spent most of it fighting the urge to shift again. The power hadn't gone away after the battle. If anything, it had grown stronger, more insistent, like a muscle she'd discovered late and now couldn't stop flexing. Every time a bird startled from the trees or a warrior rode too close, she felt her bones start to loosen, her skin start to itch with the need to transform. You're going to hurt yourself, Kadrick said on the second night, watching her pace the tent like a caged animal. You need to rest. Let your body recover. I can't. Virel's hands were shaking. It's like there's lightning under my skin and it wants out. Then let it out. Shift. Practice controlling it. What if I can't control it? What if I shift and can't shift back? The fear had been building since the battlefield. What if this thing inside me takes over and I'm just gone? Kadrick caught her wrists, stilled her. That's not how it works. You're not possessed. You're not losing yourself. You're just finally meeting yourself properly for the first time. You don't know that. I know you. His grip gentled. I know the woman who insulted me in my own council hall, who bit an assassin, who rode into battle despite being terrified. That woman doesn't disappear just because she can finally shift properly. She just gets more dangerous. Virel wanted to believe him, but the power felt too big, too wild, too separate from everything she'd been before. What if they're right? She whispered. What if I am wrong somehow? Broken in a different way? Then we're both broken. He pulled her closer. And we'll figure it out together. She kissed him then, desperate and grateful and trying to anchor herself to something real. When they finally broke apart, the power had settled slightly, still present but less demanding. Better? He asked. A little. She rested her forehead against his chest. I'm scared. Good. Scared means you're paying attention. His hand stroked through her hair. Just don't let fear make you small again. You've spent too long being small. They reached the Citadel at midday on the third day, and the entire population turned out to watch them enter. Virel rode beside Kadrick at the column's head, wearing armor that still bore bloodstains, her spine straight despite exhaustion. The crowd's reaction was split. Some cheered, warriors mostly, people who'd been at the battle or heard the stories. Others watched in silence, faces ranging from awed to hostile to calculating. Councillor Vane stood at the Citadel gates, expression unreadable. Your Majesties, the council requests your immediate attendance. We just rode for 3 days straight, Kadric said flatly. The council can wait until morning. I'm afraid they cannot. There are concerns about what occurred at the border. Concerns? Varel found her voice. We won. The border pack retreated. The Eastern Coalition withdrew. What concerns could possibly... The concerns, Your Majesty, Vane interrupted smoothly, are about you. Specifically, about what you are and what threat you might pose to the stability of the Northern Kingdom. Silence rippled through the crowd. Kadric's hand went to his sword. Choose your next words very carefully, Counselor. I speak only facts. Vane's gaze locked on Viral. Omegas do not shift as you did, do not possess power of that magnitude. Either you are not what you claim to be, or you are something unprecedented and potentially dangerous. The Council has a right, a duty, to investigate. The Council, Varel said, anger burning through exhaustion, can investigate all they want after I've slept for 12 hours and eaten a proper meal. If they have questions, they can ask me directly instead of spreading rumors in my absence. That's exactly how this works. Viral urged her horse forward until she was looking down at Vane. I am your queen, bonded to your king, recognized by your warriors, and I just saved your kingdom from a war you were too political to prevent. So unless you're formally challenging my position, I suggest you step aside and let us pass. Vane's jaw tightened, but she stepped aside. The crowd parted, and Varel rode through with her head high, feeling their stares like physical weight. That was dangerous, Kadric murmured, once they were out of earshot. Everything I do is dangerous. Might as well own it. The Queen's chambers had been cleaned and repaired in her absence, new furniture replacing what had been destroyed, all traces of blood scrubbed away. It should have felt welcoming. Instead, it felt like a stage set, carefully arranged for a performance Varel didn't know how to give. Sarah appeared within minutes, efficiently helping Varel out of the armor and into a bath so hot it made her gasp. I'm supposed to tell you that the council has scheduled a formal inquiry for tomorrow afternoon, Sarah said, scrubbing dried blood from Virel's hair, and that Elder Thorn sent a message saying you handled Vane beautifully and to keep doing exactly that. Thorn sent a message? He's been defending you to the other counselors, saying you proved yourself in battle, that questioning you now is an insult to Northern honor. Sarah's hands gentled. You have more allies than you think, my lady. And more enemies. Well, yes, but the allies are louder. Varel sank deeper into the water, letting heat work at muscles that felt like they'd been beaten with hammers. What are they saying, in the Citadel, about what happened? Sarah hesitated. Some call it a miracle, others call it unnatural. The warriors who were there tell the story like you're some kind of war deity descended to save them. The nobles who weren't there call it exaggeration, or mass hysteria, or northern superstition. She paused. And there's a third group that doesn't know what to think but is very, very afraid of you. Good, Varel said. Let them be afraid. Better than being dismissed. My lady, I'm tired of being underestimated, Sarah. Tired of being the thing people think they can control or discard. If fear is what it takes to make them see me as real, then I'll use fear. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You're different since the battle. I know. Is it the shift, the power? Virel thought about it. No, I think it's finally understanding that I was never the problem. They were. My father, the border pack, everyone who told me I was too weak or too wrong or too broken to matter. They were the ones who were broken. I was just surviving them. She emerged from the bath feeling almost human and found Kadric waiting in the sitting room with food and wine and an expression that said the council meeting had not gone well in her absence. Tell me, she said, settling beside him. They want to test you. Blood samples, examination by scholars, formal assessment of your shifting capabilities. His jaw tightened. Some are calling for you to be confined until your nature can be determined. Confined? House arrest, essentially. For your own protection and the kingdom's safety. He looked at her. I told them absolutely not. That if they want to study you, they can ask you respectfully as their queen, not demand it as if you're a specimen. It didn't go over well. Varel poured wine with hands that only shook a little. How many counselors want me gone? 5 out of 12 openly. Another 3 are fence-sitting, waiting to see which way the wind blows. That leaves 4 who support you. Thorn, surprisingly, and 3 others who see you as an asset rather than a threat. So I have a third of the council on my side. A third that will grow as you prove yourself. He caught her hand. The battle helped. The warriors respect strength, and you showed them strength they didn't think possible from an Omega. The nobles are harder. They care about bloodlines and tradition and maintaining the hierarchy that keeps them comfortable. You threaten all of that just by existing. Then maybe it's time to stop trying to fit into their hierarchy, Varel said slowly. Maybe it's time to build something different. Kadric studied her. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that I can't win by their rules. I'll always be too low-born, too Omega, too other to satisfy them. But if I change the rules entirely, she met his eyes. You said you wanted to make me so publicly powerful they can't erase me. Let's do it. Let's make me into exactly what they fear most. A queen who doesn't need their approval to rule. That's going to make enemies. I already have enemies. Might as well give them a real reason to hate me. His smile was sharp and approving. What's the first step? The council inquiry tomorrow. I don't defend myself. I don't apologize. I walk in there and own every single thing they're afraid of. She took a breath. And then I challenged them. The council chamber was packed when Varel entered the next afternoon. Not just the 12 counselors, but nobles from every major house, military commanders, scholars, even common citizens who'd somehow secured entrance. Everyone wanted to see the Omega Queen explain herself. Varel had dressed for war. Not literally, but the gown Sarah had found was deep crimson, cut to show strength rather than softness, with the royal insignia embroidered in gold across the bodice. Her hair was pulled back severely, her face unmarked by cosmetics. She wanted them to see her clearly. Kadric sat at the council head, expression neutral, but she felt the bond between them humming with support. Councillor Vane stood. Your Majesty, thank you for attending. Let's skip the pleasantries, Varel interrupted, taking her position in the center of the chamber. You want to know what I am, what happened on the battlefield, whether I'm a threat. Ask. Vane blinked, thrown off her prepared speech. The council has questions about your transformation, about the nature of your Omega status, and whether I'm Omega, Varel said clearly. Born Omega, designated Omega by every standard test, raised as Omega in a pack that made very sure I knew my place. What happened on the battlefield doesn't change that. It just proves that Omega doesn't mean weak. A counselor named Murthan leaned forward. But Omegas cannot shift as you did, cannot manifest power of that magnitude. Either you are not truly Omega, or you are something else entirely, something unprecedented. I'm both. Varel let that sink in. I'm Omega, and I'm powerful. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. You just assumed they were because it made you more comfortable. That's not. It is exactly that. Varel's voice hardened. You built a system where Omegas are weak, submissive, controllable, where Alphas hold all power and everyone else exists to serve them. And when I appear and break that system just by existing, you panic. Because if I can be Omega and powerful, what does that say about all your carefully maintained hierarchies? Silence crashed down. Elder Thorn actually smiled. The girl has a point. She has a dangerous perspective, another counselor snapped. One that undermines the natural order. Natural order? Varel laughed, sharp and bitter. There's nothing natural about the order you're defending. It's just tradition wrapped in pretty words. And traditions change. Not this one, Vane said coldly. The hierarchy exists for a reason. Alpha, Beta, Omega, each has their place, their purpose. To suggest otherwise is to invite chaos. Then chaos is coming whether you invite it or not. Varel looked around the chamber, meeting hostile eyes without flinching. Because I'm not the first Omega to be more than you expected. I'm just the first one who survived long enough to prove it. How many others did you dismiss, discard, kill because they didn't fit your comfortable categories? How much strength did you throw away because it came in the wrong package? This is absurd. This is truth. Varel's hands clenched into fists. And here's another truth. I'm not going anywhere. I'm bonded to your king. I saved your army. I proved myself on the battlefield while you sat safe in your citadel playing politics. So if you want to test me, examine me, try to prove I'm some kind of abomination, go ahead. but know that I will fight every single step, and I will make you look like fools for fearing what you don't understand." The chamber erupted, shouting, arguing, some counselors on their feet demanding order while others yelled support or condemnation. Kadrick stood, and silence fell immediately. "The council's concerns," he said quietly, "are noted, but I will not allow my mate to be treated like a specimen or a threat. She is your queen. She will be respected as such." His gaze swept the room. "Anyone who disagrees is welcome to challenge that decision formally, through trial by combat, if necessary." No one moved, because trial by combat meant facing Kadrick, and Kadrick had never lost. "Good." He looked at Virel. "Do you have anything else to say to the council?" She did. "Yes. I'm opening the Queen's chambers to any Omega in the Northern Territories who want sanctuary. Anyone fleeing abuse, dismissal, or a pack that treats them as disposable. They'll have my protection and my support." The chamber exploded again. "You can't. That's beyond your authority. You'll destabilize every pack in the region." "Probably," Virel agreed. "But I don't care. I spent my entire life watching Omegas be treated like property. That ends now, at least in my court." Vane looked apoplectic. "Your Majesty, you cannot seriously support this." "I not only support it," Kadrick said, "I'm making it official policy. The Northern Citadel is now a sanctuary for any Omega seeking asylum. Spread the word." He offered Virel his arm, and they walked out together while the council dissolved into chaos behind them. "That," Kadrick said once they were in the hallway, "was spectacular and possibly suicidal. Felt necessary." Virel's legs were shaking from adrenaline. "Did I go too far?" "Way too far. It was perfect." He pulled her into an alcove, kissed her hard. "You just declared war on every traditional pack in the territories. You know that, right?" "Good. They declared war on me first. I'm just returning the favor." Within a week, the first Omegas started arriving. 3 from nearby villages, fleeing arranged matings. 2 from border territories, escaping packs that had tried to trade them. 1 from the eastern kingdoms, half-starved and terrified, seeking the Omega Queen who'd supposedly transformed on a battlefield. Virel met with each one personally, offered them rooms in the lower citadel, promised protection and choice, and a chance to determine their own futures. The nobles were furious. The packs demanded their property back, and Virel refused every single demand. "You're making powerful enemies," Elder Thorn observed, finding her in the library where she'd been studying pack law and treaty rights. "I have powerful enemies already. At least these ones are honest about it." Thorn settled into the chair across from her. "The council is talking about forcing a vote, demanding the king revoke your sanctuary policy or face censure. Can they do that?" "They can try. Won't succeed. The king's authority supersedes council votes, but they can make things difficult." He studied her. "Why are you doing this?" "The sanctuary. You could have consolidated power quietly, played politics, waited until you had more support. Because quietly consolidating power doesn't help the Omega who's being beaten right now. Who's being traded tomorrow. Who'll die next week because someone decided she wasn't worth protecting." Virel met his eyes. "I survived because I got lucky, because Kadrick chose to protect me when he didn't have to. But luck shouldn't be the determining factor in whether someone lives or dies." Thorn was quiet for a long moment. "You're going to change everything, aren't you?" "I'm going to try." "Good." He stood slowly, joints creaking. The old ways are dying anyway. Better to have someone with a conscience steering the change than letting it happen chaotically. Just try not to get yourself killed in the process. I'm getting too old to train another queen." He left, and Virel returned to her books, making notes on pack laws that desperately needed updating. Sarah found her hours later, eyes wide with urgency. "My lady, there's someone here. She says she needs to speak with you privately. She's—" Sarah lowered her voice. "She's from the border pack, from your old territory." Virel's heart jumped. "Who?" "She wouldn't give her name, just said you'd want to see her." Virel followed Sarah to a small receiving room where a woman waited, hooded and nervous. When she pushed back the hood, Virel's breath caught. "Mira?" Her sister, younger by 2 years, quieter, softer, someone Virel hadn't thought about in weeks, stood there looking exhausted and terrified. "I'm sorry," Mira whispered. I didn't know where else to go. Varel crossed the room, pulled her into a hug. What happened? Why are you here? Father, Mira's voice broke. After you left, after what happened at the battle, he's been raging, taking it out on anyone who defended you, anyone who questioned sending you away. And then he decided to use me the same way he used you, arranged a mating to the Eastern Territories, another trade to secure another treaty. She pulled back, eyes desperate. I ran. I didn't know if the sanctuary stories were true, but I had to try. Fury burned through Viral's chest. You're safe now, I promise. He can't touch you here. He'll demand I be returned. He'll say, I'm stolen property. Then he'll be wrong. Viril's hands tightened on her sister's shoulders. You're not property. Neither was I. And I'm done letting him treat us like we are. Mira's eyes filled with tears. I heard what you did. At the battle. The shifting. Everyone's talking about it. They're saying you're blessed or cursed or touched by old magic. I'm none of those things. I'm just finally strong enough to fight back. Teach me. Mira's voice was fierce. Teach me to be strong like you. I don't want to run anymore. I want to fight. Varel looked at her sister, really looked at her, saw the determination under the fear, the strength waiting to be unlocked, and made a decision. All right, she said. Let's start now. The training yard was mostly empty when Varel brought Mira down that evening. A few warriors practicing forms in the corner, but otherwise quiet. Daria was there, surprisingly, working through sword drills with focused intensity. She looked up when Varel approached. Didn't expect to see you here, Daria said. I need a favor. Of course you do. But Daria's tone wasn't hostile, almost amused. What kind of favor? My sister needs to learn to defend herself, basic combat, weapons training, survival skills. You're the best fighter I know. Teach her. Daria looked at Mira, assessing. She's Omega like you? Yes. Any shifting ability? I don't know. We never got the chance to find out in our pack. Daria's expression tightened with recognition. Yeah, I know how that goes. She turned to Mira. You serious about this? Learning to fight isn't pretty. It's painful and humiliating, and you'll want to quit every single day. I'm serious, Mira said quietly. I've spent my whole life being afraid. I'm done with it. Good answer, Daria gestured to the practice swords. Pick one up. Let's see what we're working with. Over the next weeks, the sanctuary grew. 8 Omegas, then 15, then 23. Virel met with each one, learned their stories, found them places in the Citadel, some as servants, some as scholars, 2 who had unexpected combat talent training with Daria alongside Mira. The council fought her at every step, demanding the sanctuary be closed, threatening to cut funding, warning that she was destabilizing the entire regional hierarchy. Virel fought back with law and precedent and sheer stubborn will, and slowly, incrementally, she started winning. Not because she convinced them she was right, because she made it more costly to oppose her than to accept her. Warriors who'd fought beside her at the battle spoke up in her defense. Commoners who'd heard the sanctuary stories began viewing her as a protector rather than a threat. Even some nobles, younger ones mostly, who'd grown up in the old system and resented it, started offering quiet support. The shift in power was subtle but undeniable. And then, 6 weeks after the battle, a messenger arrived from the Eastern Coalition. Marcus Vrati requested an audience with the Northern King and Queen. It's a trap, Councillor Vane said immediately. He wants revenge for abandoning the border pack. He'll try to assassinate you. Or, Kadric said, reading the message again, he wants to negotiate. He saw what Virel can do. He's smart enough to recognize that attacking us now would be suicidal. What does he want? Virel asked. To talk, privately, just the 3 of us. Kadric looked at her. Your decision. We can refuse, send a formal delegation instead. No. Virel thought about the Omega who'd arrived yesterday, brutalized and discarded by an Eastern pack. I'll meet with him, but on our territory. In our hall, where he has to acknowledge our authority. Marcus Vrati arrived 3 days later with minimal escort, dressed in formal diplomatic attire rather than battle gear. He bowed correctly to both of them, which was more respect than Virel had expected. Your Majesties, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Let's skip the formalities, Virel said, echoing her council chamber approach. What do you want? Marcus smiled slightly. Direct. I appreciate that. He settled into the offered chair. I want to propose an alliance, a formal treaty between the Eastern Coalition and the Northern Kingdom. We already have treaties, Kadric said, trade agreements and non-aggression pacts. I'm proposing something deeper. Mutual defense, shared resources, and, he looked at Virel, adoption of your sanctuary policy across coalition territories. Virel's breath caught. You want to offer asylum to Omegas? I want to stop hemorrhaging strength because we're too stupid to recognize it. Marcus leaned forward. What you did at the battlefield changed the game. Every Omega in 3 kingdoms heard the story. Some are fleeing to you. Others are starting to question their pacts. The smart leaders recognize this as an opportunity, a chance to attract strength they'd normally lose. The stupid ones are trying to crack down harder, which just makes more Omegas flee. I'd rather be smart. This is about power, Kadric said, not compassion. Everything is about power. But power and compassion aren't mutually exclusive. Marcus's gaze didn't waver. You're changing the hierarchy whether you mean to or not. I'm offering to change with you instead of being swept away by you. That seems practical. Virel studied him, looking for deception, finding only calculated honesty. What do you get out of this? Alliance with a kingdom that just proved it can win against superior numbers. Access to whatever that transformation of yours was, if it's something that can be taught or understood. And, he smiled, the credit for being forward-thinking instead of desperately trying to maintain a dying system. You'll be opposed, Kadric warned. Your traditional packs won't like this. They'll adapt or be replaced. That's how evolution works. Marcus stood. I'm not asking for an answer today. Think about it. Discuss it with your council. But know that I'm serious, and that I'm not the only Eastern Alpha watching what you're building and wondering if it's time to build something different. He left, and Virel looked at Kadric. Did that actually just happen? She asked. I think it did. He was grinning. You just turned political isolation into political opportunity in 6 weeks. I didn't do anything except refuse to be quiet. Exactly. He pulled her close. That's all it took. Just refusing to be silent. The council meeting to discuss Marcus's proposal was predictably chaotic. Half wanted to reject it outright, viewing the Eastern Coalition as untrustworthy. The other half saw the strategic advantage of a formal alliance. Virel listened to the debate for an hour before standing. We accept, she said clearly. Vane looked appalled. Your Majesty, you cannot make that decision unilaterally. I can and I am. The sanctuary was my idea. If the coalition wants to adopt it, that strengthens both kingdoms. It proves the policy works. And it gives Omegas throughout the region a real choice instead of just one safe place to run. She looked around the chamber. Anyone who opposes this is welcome to explain why they think keeping Omegas powerless benefits the kingdom. Silence. Because nobody wanted to say that part out loud. Good. Virel sat back down. Send Marcus our acceptance. And start drafting the formal treaty. Elder Thorn was actually laughing when the meeting adjourned. You just steamrolled the entire council. They were taking too long, Virel said. They were trying to maintain some illusion of authority. You're making them irrelevant. Good. They were already irrelevant. I'm just making it obvious. That night, Virel stood on the balcony outside the Queen's chambers and looked out at the citadel. The sanctuary wing was lit up, Omegas settling into new lives, learning new skills, becoming something more than what they'd been. Kadric joined her, wrapping arms around her from behind. Tired? He asked. Exhausted and exhilarated and terrified I'm doing everything wrong. You're doing it exactly right. He kissed her temple. 6 weeks ago you arrived here in chains. Now you're rewriting treaties and changing kingdoms. That's not wrong. That's revolutionary. Virel leaned back against him, letting his strength steady her. My father must be losing his mind. Your father, Kadric said quietly, sent another message today, demanding Mira's return and threatening war if we don't comply. Virel's hands tightened on the balcony railing. What did you tell him? That his daughter is a free citizen of the Northern Kingdom under my protection, and if he wants her back, he's welcome to come take her. Assuming he can get past 3,000 warriors and one very angry queen who transforms into a legend when threatened. He won't come. No, he'll rage and bluster and try to save face, but he won't come. He's too much of a coward. Viral thought about her father, about the man who'd sold her to save himself, who'd beaten Mira for his own failures, who represented everything she'd been running from her entire life. I want to go back, she said suddenly. Kadric tensed. What? To the border territories. Not to stay, just to visit. To stand in my father's hall as your queen and show him exactly what I've become. Show all of them. She turned in his arms. I want them to see that I didn't just survive, I won. His expression was complicated, pride and worry mixed. That's dangerous and potentially very satisfying. When? Next month, after the Eastern Treaty is signed. When we have the political leverage and the military backing. She smiled. And when I've had enough time to practice shifting without accidentally destroying things. You're getting better at that. I destroyed the training yard twice last week. Yes, but intentionally. That's progress. She laughed, and it felt good, real and free, and nothing like the girl who'd arrived in chains. Below them, the citadel was settling into evening, warriors heading to mess halls, scholars to libraries, Omegas to sanctuary wings where they were safe and seen and valuable. Viral had been sent here to break. Instead, she'd broken everything that tried to cage her. And now, standing in the arms of a king who'd chosen to fight for her instead of using her, looking out at a kingdom she was slowly, stubbornly reshaping into something better, Viral finally understood what power really meant. Not the ability to hurt, not even the refusal to be hurt, but the choice to protect others from the same pain that had almost destroyed her. That was the kind of power worth having. That was the kind of queen worth becoming. The Eastern Treaty was signed on a cold morning in late autumn, witnessed by representatives from 6 kingdoms and more nobility than the Great Hall could comfortably hold. Marcus Vrati and Kadric clasped hands over the document, and Viral stood beside them as equal witness, not decoration, not symbol, but active participant in reshaping regional politics. Councillor Vane looked like she'd swallowed glass through the entire ceremony. You're enjoying this too much, Kadric murmured as they walked from the hall afterward. Can you blame me? 2 months ago they wanted me locked in a cell. Now I'm signing treaties. Viral grinned. It's a good day. It's about to get better. He handed her a sealed letter. Or possibly worse, depending on your perspective. She broke the seal, read quickly, and her grin widened. My father agreed to the visit. He didn't have much choice. Refusing would make him look weak in front of every border pack. Accepting at least lets him pretend he has some control over the situation. When do we leave? 3 days. Small escort, 50 warriors, enough to look official without seeming like an invasion, and Mira is coming with us. Viral looked up sharply. Is that safe? Probably not. But she asked, and I think she deserves the chance to face him on her terms instead of his. Kadric's expression softened. Besides, Daria says she's gotten good with a blade. Might as well let her use those skills. Mira had indeed gotten good. Viral watched her spar in the training yard that afternoon, faster than she'd been a month ago, more confident, landing hits that made Daria actually work to counter them. She's ready, Daria said, joining Viral at the yard's edge. Still rough around the edges, but she won't freeze if things go bad. Things won't go bad, Viral said, not quite believing it. Things always go bad. Question is whether you're prepared when they do. Daria glanced at her. You planning to shift in front of your father? Show him what he threw away? I hadn't decided. You should. Not because he deserves to see it, but because everyone else does. Every Omega in that territory who thinks they're worthless needs to see what's possible. Daria's voice went quiet. I was wrong about you, back at the beginning. I thought you were weak. Thought you'd break the first time things got hard. But you didn't break. You just got sharper. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. I'm still mostly an asshole. But Daria was smiling slightly. Just try not to die down there. Would be disappointing after all this effort. The journey to the border territories took 4 days, and Viral spent most of it fighting nerves. She'd left this place in chains, sold like livestock, expecting to die in a foreign citadel. Returning as queen felt surreal, like acting in a play where she'd memorized the wrong lines. You're thinking too much, Mira said on the 3rd night, sitting beside Viral at the campfire. I can see you spiraling. I'm not spiraling. You've been staring at that same piece of bread for 10 minutes without eating it. That's spiraling. Varel set down the bread. What if I'm wrong? What if going back is just ego, proving a point to people whose opinions shouldn't matter anymore? Then it's ego, Mira shrugged. But it's earned ego. And maybe seeing you will help someone else find the courage to leave. Maybe it'll save even one Omega from what you went through. She paused. Besides, I want to see Father's face when you walk in. That alone is worth the trip. They reached the border pack territory at midday on the fourth day, and Viral's chest tightened at the familiar landscape. The worn buildings, the training grounds where she'd watched warriors practice and known she'd never be allowed to join them. The great hall where her father held court. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. The pack turned out to watch them arrive, lining the streets in silence. Some faces she recognized. Neighbors, distant relatives, people who'd watched her grow up dismissed and forgotten. Their expressions ranged from shock to fear to something that might have been hope. Her father waited at the hall entrance, flanked by his remaining advisors. He looked older than Virel remembered, smaller somehow, diminished by failures he'd tried to offload onto his daughters. Alpha Torvin, Kadric said formally. Thank you for receiving us. Your Majesty, Torvin's voice was stiff. And, daughter, you've returned. I've returned, Virel agreed, not bothering with warmth. As promised in our correspondence. Yes. The correspondence that threatened consequences if I refused. Torvin's gaze flicked to the northern warriors, to Kadric, back to Virel with barely concealed hostility. Quite the change from the weak thing we sent north. That weak thing, Virel said quietly, is your queen now. You might want to remember that. They were shown to guest quarters, better than Virel had expected, but still inferior to what Northern protocol demanded. Deliberate insult, probably. She didn't care. The formal meeting was scheduled for evening, giving Virel time to walk through the territory she'd grown up in. Mira came with her, along with 6 guards who tried and failed to be subtle about their protective formation. That's where I used to hide, Virel said, pointing to a cluster of storage buildings. When Father was in one of his moods, I'd stay there until he calmed down or forgot why he was angry. I hid in the library, Mira said softly. Behind the history section, no one read. I thought if I stayed quiet enough, small enough, maybe he'd forget I existed. Did it work? Until he needed another daughter to trade. Then I became very memorable very quickly. Mira's jaw tightened. I'm glad you got out. I'm glad you became this. I'm glad you got out too. Virel squeezed her hand. And you're becoming something too, something strong. They passed the Omega quarters, smaller buildings, less maintained, where unmated Omegas lived under pack supervision until they were traded or claimed or discarded. A few faces peered from windows, young and frightened and achingly familiar. Virel made a decision. I want to talk to them, she said to the guards. The Omegas. Alone. The lead guard frowned. Your Majesty, protocol. I'm not asking permission. I'm informing you of my intent. She softened slightly. Wait outside. If I need help, you'll know. Inside, the Omega quarters were exactly as Virel remembered. Cramped rooms, thin blankets, an atmosphere of resigned despair. 8 Omegas sat in the common area, watching her with wide eyes. I'm Virel, she said, though they obviously knew. I used to live here, in this exact building actually, room 3, with the broken window that never got fixed. A young Omega, maybe 16, brown-haired and hollow-eyed, spoke up. They said you became queen, that you shifted on a battlefield and saved the Northern Kingdom. That's mostly true. I did shift, I did fight, but I didn't save anyone. I just refused to die quietly. Virel settled on the floor, ignoring protocol. What are your names? They introduced themselves hesitantly. Kara, Lissa, Fen, Jory, and 4 others whose names Virel memorized carefully. These were her people, the ones she'd left behind without meaning to. Why did you come back? Lissa asked. If you escaped, why would you ever come back here? Because leaving isn't the same as winning, and because I wanted you to see that there's another option, another life possible beyond what this pack tells you. Virel met each of their eyes. The Northern Citadel has a sanctuary. Any Omega who wants to leave, who wants safety and choice and the chance to determine their own future, you're welcome. All of you. Just like that? Ben's voice was skeptical. We walk away and you protect us? Just like that. I won't lie. It's hard. The Northern Court isn't automatically kind. You'll face judgment and suspicion and people who think you don't belong. But you'll face it as free citizens, not property. And you'll have support. Others who've made the same choice. Your father will never allow it, Kara whispered. He'll hunt us down, drag us back. Let him try. Varel's voice hardened. He doesn't own you. He never did. The only power he has is the power you give him by believing you have no other choice. They sat in silence for a long moment, hope and fear warring on their faces. If we came, Jory said carefully, when would we have to leave? Tomorrow morning, before dawn. My escort can protect you during travel. Once we reach Northern Territory, you're under my authority and he can't touch you. Varel stood. Think about it. Decide for yourselves. But know that the offer is real, and I mean it. She left before they could respond, before emotion could crack her composure. The formal meeting that evening was tense and performative. Her father sat at the hall's head, trying to project authority he no longer held. His advisors flanked him, men who'd grown comfortable in a system that benefited them, who viewed Virel's return as threat rather than progress. So, Torvin said once everyone was seated, the prodigal daughter returns, wearing another man's crown and thinking herself better than the family who raised her. The family who raised me, Virel said evenly, sold me to save themselves. Let's not pretend this was a loving home I abandoned. We did what was necessary for the pack's survival. You did what was convenient for your ego. There's a difference. She leaned forward. But I'm not here to argue about the past. I'm here to discuss the future. What future? You've aligned yourself with the North, made yourself their symbol. You're no longer pack. No, Varel agreed. I'm not pack. I'm kingdom. And I'm offering you a choice. Align with the Northern Eastern Alliance. Adopt the sanctuary policy. Join the new system that's forming whether you fight it or not. Or stay isolated and watch as every strong Omega in your territory flees to places that value them. Torvin's face flushed red. You threaten me? In my own hall? I'm not threatening. I'm stating facts. Your pack is weak. Your territory is barely holding. The warriors you have left are conscripts who don't want to be here. You need the Alliance more than the Alliance needs you. She paused. But I'm offering it anyway, because despite everything, this is still the place I came from. I'd rather see it survive than collapse. Generous of you, one of the advisors sneered. The Omega who fled offers to save us from ourselves. The Queen, Kadric interrupted quietly, who your Alpha tried to have killed, who survived assassination attempts, and war, and the deliberate cruelty of people who should have protected her. Yes, she's offering to help. I'd suggest you consider accepting. The meeting devolved into argument, advisors objecting, Torvin blustering, Kadric calmly dismantling every weak point in their position. Varel stayed silent through most of it, watching her father realize he'd lost control of the narrative completely. Finally, Torvin slammed his hand on the table. Enough! I will not be dictated to by a daughter I disowned and a northern king who thinks military strength equals righteousness. Get out. All of you. This meeting is over. As you wish. Varel stood smoothly. But know that I'm extending the sanctuary offer to every Omega in your territory. By tomorrow morning, you might find you've lost more than just one daughter. She walked out with her head high, feeling her father's rage like heat against her back. That went well, Kadric said once they were outside. He's never going to join the Alliance. Probably not, but everyone else in that room heard the offer, heard him refuse it out of pride. That matters. He caught her hand. And speaking of matters, there are 11 Omegas waiting at the guest quarters. They want to leave with us tomorrow. Varel's breath caught. 11? Apparently word spread fast. They're terrified and determined in equal measure. Remind you of anyone? She laughed, relief and vindication mixed. We can protect 11. We can protect 100 if we need to, though the border pack might object. Let them object. What are they going to do? Attack a royal escort? As it turned out, that was exactly what they tried to do. The attack came at dawn as they were preparing to leave. Omegas gathered nervously among the northern warriors. 50 border pack soldiers appeared, blocking the road, weapons drawn. Torvin pushed through to the front, face twisted with fury. "You will not steal my people. Those Omegas belong to this pack." "Those Omegas," Varel interrupted, "belong to themselves, and they've chosen to leave. I don't recognize their choice. I don't recognize your authority here." His hand went to his sword. "Stand down or face the consequences." Kadric moved to draw his weapon, but Varel stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Let me," she said quietly. "Varel, trust me." She walked forward slowly, alone, until she stood 10 feet from her father. The border pack soldier shifted nervously, recognizing the woman who'd transformed on a battlefield and turned the tide of war. "You want to fight?" Varel asked. "Fine. Let's fight, you and me. Right here. No weapons. Just shift." She smiled without humor. "Unless you're afraid your weak, broken daughter might actually beat you." Torvin's face went purple. "You think you can challenge me? I'm alpha of this pack. You're a bully who's losing control and doesn't know what to do about it. Prove me wrong. Shift. Fight me. Show everyone here that you're still strong enough to lead." For a long moment, she thought he might refuse, thought he might back down and let them leave rather than risk public humiliation. Then he shifted. The alpha form was impressive, larger than most wolves, dark-furred and powerful, built for dominance and violence. Exactly what Torvin had always valued most. Varel felt the power in her chest surge in response. She'd been practicing for weeks, learning to control the transformation, to channel it without destroying everything around her. She shifted fast. The Omega wolf that emerged was massive, even larger than she'd been on the battlefield, fur storm gray touched with silver, eyes blazing with compressed power finally unleashed. She stood half again as tall as Torvin's alpha form, and the sheer presence radiating from her made warriors on both sides back away instinctively. Torvin hesitated, just for a second. That was all Varel needed. She hit him like an avalanche, fast, brutal, overwhelming. He tried to counter, tried to use alpha dominance to force her down, but it rolled off her like water. She was Omega, yes, but she was also fury and survival, and every single time he told her she was worthless made manifest. The fight lasted maybe 30 seconds. She had him pinned, jaws at his throat, one paw on his chest. He struggled briefly, then went still, the universal sign of submission. Viral held him there for a long moment, letting everyone see, letting every Omega in the territory understand what was possible, letting her father feel the absolute reversal of power. Then she shifted back, standing over him human and bloody and utterly unbowed. "You don't own them," she said quietly. "You never did. The only reason you had any power was because we let you. That ends now." She turned to the 11 waiting Omegas. "Anyone who wants to leave, come with me. Anyone who wants to stay, stay. It's your choice. Always your choice." All 11 stepped forward. Torvin shifted back, gasping and humiliated. "You'll regret this, all of you. The pack won't survive without—" "Then maybe the pack deserves to fail." Mira's voice cut through his rage. She stepped forward, standing beside Viral. "Maybe a system that requires keeping half the population powerless isn't worth preserving." Torvin stared at his daughters, both of them standing together, both of them stronger than he'd ever allowed them to be, and seemed to crumple. "Get out," he whispered. "All of you, just get out." They left. 50 northern warriors, 2 queens, and 11 Omegas who'd chosen freedom over familiarity. The border pack soldiers didn't try to stop them. Varel didn't look back. The journey home took 5 days, and by the time they reached the northern citadel, word had spread. The Omega Queen had returned to her birth pack and beaten her alpha father in single combat, had walked away with 11 more refugees, had proven publicly and undeniably that the old hierarchy was dying. The crowd that met them was enormous. Not just warriors and nobles, but commoners, servants, Omegas from the sanctuary, everyone who'd heard the stories and wanted to see if they were real. Viral rode beside Kadric through the gates, and the roar that went up shook the citadel walls. "They're cheering for you," he said. "They're cheering for the idea of me, the symbol." She looked at the faces, awed, hopeful, terrified, inspired. "I just hope I can live up to it." "You already have." The formal coronation happened a week later. Not because Virel wasn't already queen, the bond in battle had settled that, but because Kadric wanted it official in every possible way. Wanted no room for the council to question, no loopholes for enemies to exploit. She wore white again, but this time it was armor disguised as silk. A gown that made her look regal and untouchable and absolutely capable of violence if necessary. The crown was northern steel worked with eastern gold, symbol of the alliance she'd helped forge. Elder Thorn performed the ceremony, his ancient hand steady as he placed the crown on her head. "You came here in chains," he said, voice carrying through the packed great hall. "You were meant to break, meant to fail, meant to be forgotten like every treaty bride before you. But you refused, you fought, you survived. And in surviving, you changed everything." He stepped back and Kadric took his place. "I claim you," he said formally, repeating the words from their bonding but with new weight. Not as pawn or hostage or political necessity, but as partner, as equal, as the woman who made me believe change was possible. "I claim you," Virel responded, voice steady. "Not as savior or protector or escape route, but as the man who chose to fight for me when he didn't have to, who saw strength where others saw weakness, who helped me become who I was always meant to be." The bond between them flared bright enough that people in the back rows gasped. Power and love and absolute certainty woven together until they were indistinguishable. When they kissed, the hall erupted. The celebration lasted 3 days. Northern warriors drank with Eastern diplomats. Omegas from the sanctuary mingled with nobles who'd initially opposed them. The council, even Vayne grudgingly, acknowledged that Virel had achieved something unprecedented. She'd survived. She'd won. She'd changed the game. On the 4th day, Virel found herself in the library with Sarah, reviewing requests from 3 more territories wanting to establish sanctuaries. "This is getting out of control," Sarah said, but she was smiling. "We're going to need a larger administrative staff just to handle the applications." "Good problem to have," Virel signed another approval. "Better than wondering if we'll survive the week." "Do you ever miss it?" Sarah asked suddenly. "The simplicity of when things were just about survival?" Virel thought about it. "No, survival is exhausting. This is hard in a different way, but at least it means something beyond just not dying." Mira appeared in the doorway, Daria beside her. "The Eastern delegation is asking for you, something about expanding the treaty to include educational exchanges." "Of course they are." Virel stood, stretched muscles that still ached from the fight with her father. "Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes. After they left, she stood at the library window, looking out at the citadel. The sanctuary wing was being expanded. The training yards now included Omega warriors alongside alphas and betas. The council chambers had new voices, representatives from territories that had adopted the alliance, speakers for populations previously ignored. Everything was different. Everything was still changing. Kadric found her there an hour later, after the Eastern delegation meeting had concluded with yet another signed agreement. "Tired?" he asked. "Always. Also exhilarated. Also terrified we're building something too fast and it'll collapse." She leaned against him. "Normal feelings, right?" "Extremely normal for someone reshaping an entire regional power structure." He kissed her temple. "You know the council is talking about making the sanctuary policy mandatory across all allied territories? Not optional, required. That'll cause problems. Probably. But smaller problems than watching refugees flood across borders while traditional pacts try to maintain control through violence." He paused. "They're also discussing succession laws, specifically removing the alpha-only requirement for inheriting leadership." Virel pulled back to look at him. That's huge. That's what you started, whether you meant to or not." His smile was crooked. The Omega Queen who proved hierarchy was fiction. Of course, succession laws are being questioned. "I just wanted to survive. And in surviving, you made everyone else question why survival should be dependent on birth status." He caught her hands. "That's the thing about revolution, love. It doesn't stop just because you win. It keeps going until the whole system transforms." That night, alone in their chambers, Virel stood before the mirror and studied herself. The girl who'd arrived in chains was gone. Not erased, but evolved. Grown into someone who'd learned that strength wasn't about never being afraid. It was about being terrified and fighting anyway. The crown sat on the dresser, heavy with responsibility and symbol and the weight of everyone who was watching to see if she'd fail. She wouldn't fail. Not because she was perfect or invincible or blessed, but because she'd survived worse and knew that survival itself was victory. Kadric came up behind her, wrapped arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "That I was sent here to die," Viral said quietly, "and instead I became the thing that killed the system that tried to destroy me." Poetic. True. She turned in his arms. "Thank you for choosing to see me, for fighting with me instead of for me, for believing I could be more than what I was supposed to be. Thank you for being stubborn enough to survive, for refusing to break when breaking would have been easier, for changing me as much as you changed everything else." He kissed her softly. "I love you, my impossible, revolutionary, absolutely terrifying queen. I love you too, my ruthless, secretly soft, surprisingly progressive king." They stood there in the quiet, two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built something better from the wreckage. Outside, the Northern Kingdom was changing. Omegas were claiming power, traditional hierarchies were crumbling, new alliances were forming, and at the center of it all was a woman who'd been sent to die and had chosen to live instead. Virel Ashwin had been a pawn, a hostage, a sacrifice. Now she was a queen who'd rewritten the rules, and she was just getting started. 6 months later, representatives from 12 kingdoms gathered in the Northern Citadel for the first Summit of Equals, a council where leadership was determined by merit and choice rather than bloodline and force. Viral stood at the center table, no longer seeking approval or permission, and proposed a unified code of rights for Omegas across all territories. The debate was fierce, the opposition was loud, but when the vote came, the measure passed, because enough people had seen what was possible when power was shared instead of hoarded, when strength was recognized in all its forms instead of just the ones tradition deemed acceptable. When someone brave enough or stupid enough stood up and said, "This is wrong," and refused to back down. Virel walked out of that summit hall knowing the work wasn't finished, would probably never be finished. There would always be those who resisted change, who clung to old hierarchies, who viewed progress as threat. But there would also be Omegas who heard the stories and found courage, who made different choices because they knew choices existed, who survived because someone had fought to make survival possible. That was legacy worth building. That was the kind of queen worth being. And as Viral stood on the Citadel walls that evening, watching the sun set over a kingdom she'd helped reshape, she felt the bond with Kadric pulse warm and steady, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this, had never been alone once someone chose to see her clearly. She'd been sent north to break. Instead, she'd broken every chain that tried to hold her, and in the process, she'd shown thousands of others how to break theirs too. The Omega Queen, the woman who'd survived, the legend who'd started as nothing and became everything. Virel Ashwin had won, not because the fight was over, but because she'd finally learned that winning meant refusing to let anyone else define what she was capable of. And that was the most dangerous power of all.